Hey guys, I told you that I had a lot more ideas for builds in this series, and today's is definitely a bit more off meta than normal, especially if you guys are not, if you guys are used to like fractals and raid builds. Today's build is for the engineer profession using the Scrapper Elite Specialization. Scrapper is one of the most underutilized elite specs in PvE, but hopefully this video remedies that just a little bit. This build is super satisfying to play and is insanely tanky without really hurting its DPS. On top of all that, it self-buffs super well and gets to run glass cannon gear, and so it does more than respectable DPS, especially when solo, but you can play it without feeling too bad in group content. Despite the super simple playstyle, it has tons of utility and a nice amount of tools at its disposal that will allow you to handle anything the game can throw at it. So with all of that said, let's get into it and see what this build's all about. Alright, so gear. For gear, we are going to use full Berserker gear in every slot. You might be surprised to hear that, that it's full Berserker in a build that I'm also describing as super tanky, but as we'll see, it really doesn't end up making us squishy at all. As far as weapons, we're just going to use a hammer with Sigil of Force and Sigil of Strength. For armor, we are going to use Superior Rune of Strength. In total, this setup will contribute to our self-buffing capabilities and ensure that we have sufficient DPS to deal with the threats that we face. I do want to comment that Hammer for Scrapper is one of the most well-rounded weapons available to any profession, in that it has a great balance of mobility, damage, and defense. So yeah, I definitely highly recommend it. As far as food goes for the build, now's as good a time as any to mention it. Basically any food that gives you power, precision, or ferocity is good. Sweet and spicy butternut is a great example. You could also use steaks with winterberry sauce. They're perfectly valid. You're not going to be wasting anything there. And additionally, I should also mention that golden fried dumplings are also very good. And in a lot of cases, especially single target situations where you're not cleaving so much, golden fried dumplings will actually probably add the most DPS of any food. Now, as far as the utility slot goes, of course, sharpening stones are quite good, but it is also worth considering, well, not Masterful Malice, but Writ of Masterful Strength is quite strong in this build because we will almost always be at full health. So with that said, it's a very easy build to gear. Full Berserker, Strength Runes, and then Hammer with Force and Strength. Really, there's not too much to say about the gear. So with having said it, let's get into the traits. Okay guys, for traits, we are going to select explosives and firearms, and for our elite specialization, we will be taking Scrapper. Explosives has some nice DPS boosting traits, and these traits, while good in and of themselves, have some very strong synergies with the Scrapper trait line, which we'll discuss. We are going to take Glass Cannon. It's a simple damage upgrade that's easy to maintain, thanks to our tankiness, which is very helpful. Aim Assisted Rocket is going to add a little bit of extra damage, and each little rocket counts as an explosion, so it inflicts some vuln stacks on the boss, which will add up to a bit of useful damage. And then at Grandmaster, we take Big Boomer, which is a nice damage increase and gives us a bit of a passive heal, which is also very good. It is important to note that when playing solo, vulnerability stacks are a huge damage increase and very important to focus on, more so than in group play where you tend to get 25 stacks of vuln passively without anyone actually having to think about it. And it is worth remembering that thanks to Shaped Charge, that our vuln stacks do even more for us than they would do from a normal build. Therefore, it is an area of focus that in this build in particular, we should pay a special attention to. Firearms is our second choice, and it is also taken for DPS purposes, especially for boosts in our crit chance, which is another thing that is always important to consider in solo play. High Caliber is going to give us a 15% critical strike chance, which is a very, very nice amount of crit chance for an Adept trait. No Scope is going to give us access to 50% Fury uptime, which is wonderful, as well as some extra Ferocity, so we're getting a lot of benefit from that. And our Grandmaster is going to be Modified Ammunition. Modified Ammo isn't necessarily at its best in a solo setting, but it is still a nice trait boost for us, if not the greatest thing like it is in group play, especially raids, when you can be sure that the boss is going to have all kinds of conditions. Scrapper, however, is where it all really comes together. It gives us damage and an absolute ton of defense and utility. So first we're going to take Gyroscopic Acceleration, which makes all our gyros and our function gyro grant us super speed, which, besides the quality of life of having super speed, has synergy with other traits. Object in Motion, one of those other traits, gives us 15% more damage based on if we have swiftness, stability, or super speed. We tend to have all three of these at different various times, so it's just a nice damage boost overall. And then our Grandmaster trait is Applied Force, which is just a super awesome Grandmaster trait, which gives us 30% quickness uptime when solo and an extra 200 power when we have it. All of that said, the most important trait in the entire line, the one that makes this build possible, is Impact Savant. Impact Savant is just amazing. It does have the drawback of reducing our health pool, but what it does in exchange for reducing our vitality is it gives us 15% of our outgoing damage as barrier that we gained. When combined with our healing skill, our tool belt skills, and as well as our active defenses, the barrier that we generate from our damage going out is able to keep us at full health constantly, even if we're eating incoming damage, even if we're just sitting there taking every attack that comes our way. As long as we can keep our damage going out, we're going to be dealing damage and healing and putting up barrier faster than we take incoming damage, and it's just absolutely insane. It is quite possibly one of the most overpowered and broken traits in PvE, right up there with Invigorating Precision on Thief and Battle Scars on Revenant. So cannot stress enough how badass Impact Savant is and how good it makes this build. All right, as far as skills go, our healing skill is going to be Medic Gyro. It gives a decent amount of heal and counts as a well for super speed uptime, and provides a water field that you can leap through for additional heals if needed, as well as providing us with a tool belt skill that gives us some protection, gives us another water field, and gives us even more super speed. So between Medic Gyro alone is a pretty significant amount of super speed uptime, and therefore we like it. Grenade Kit is on our bar, but we won't normally be swapping to it during combat. Really, its main purpose is to add the Grenade Barrage Toolbelt skill, which is not only our biggest single highest DPS damage skill, but it's also an explosion that stacks up to 6 stacks of Vuln. So it is a very powerful burst skill in that it does big damage, it inflicts a lot of Vuln in a short amount of time, and makes the next 5 seconds of damage that we put in even better. So our next skill is Shredder Gyro, which is a damage boost for us, as well as, again, giving us super speed, which we like, and it's a whirl finisher. Not particular. Whirl finishes are kind of weak, but just super speed is great. A damage boost is great. Both things are great. And then Bulwark Gyro is also going to give us some super speed, but the main benefit is that it gives us even more barrier, as well as giving some AoE barrier to anyone who happens to be with us. But it also gives us a very nice tool belt skill called Defense Field that gives us stability and blocks projectiles. In a very lot of PvE situations, having Defense Field is just a hard carry, in that you can just ignore projectiles while you're face tanking a mob and kill the mob before it kills you. Projectiles tend to be in Guild Wars 2 overpowered on enemy PvE mobs, so having a single one-button skill that completely nullifies projectiles on your build without having to compromise your build is a really, really good thing. And then our last is our elite skill, Sneak Gyro, which is one of the best and easiest sources of stealth in the game and makes a lot of the tougher parts of PvE easier. You could use it for simply for super speed uptime. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because we can keep pretty good uptime with super speed without it. But it's really just a utility thing that's going to make your life easier in PvE. There's just so many times where you just want to sneak past a bunch of mobs and channel the skill point and be out of there without having to fight any of the mobs. Like maybe there's a skill point or something that's being guarded by a powerful champion mob and you're solo and you don't necessarily want to fight it. You can just stealth and get past it, and it's just a really useful thing to have. And in a pinch, you can use it to give you some super speed uptime. Again, as I've said in every video of the series and will continue to say, in solo play, in open world PvE or story, you have to be willing to change your build as the situation requires. Solo PvE has a lot more of a variety of situations you can find yourself in compared to raids or fractals, which are a lot more linear and predictable. So as always, be willing to change out a skill on your bar that is ineffective in your current situation for one that would be more effective and help you trivialize whatever difficulty you find yourself in. So as always, guys, I'm not going to be showing a DPS rotation on a golem for this build or for any other builds I do in this series. As a result, because of the fact that when playing solo, stuff either dies incredibly quickly or it requires too much movement, counterplay, dodging, and blocking to really qualify as a rotation. What matters most is getting your high damage skills off during windows of opportunity, and this usually entails some combos and skill priorities that I want to discuss. So one function of this build that is super important to remember is super speed uptime. You have 5 skills between your heal and your 2 utility gyros, function gyro, and your tool belt skills that are on 20-second cooldowns. So if you use them sequentially, you should have fairly solid super speed uptime. Oftentimes you won't have this luxury. You'll have to use your skills as you need them. But ideally, you want to try to space them out as best you can to get big chunks of uptime. The next thing that's worth mentioning is your main damage skills are actually your auto attack chains. Not only do your auto attack chains hit very hard, they are also how you stack might primarily. And it's very important to complete your auto attack chain when you start them because the third skill in the chain stacks 3 stacks of might and hits the hardest. So it's just overall hugely important that you guys stack do all 3 of your auto attacks in the chain before interrupting it for one of your other more important skills. The second skill in your bar, Electro Whirl, is a DPS increase and stacks Vuln, which itself is a big DPS increase. And additionally, it's a whirl finisher, and most of our fields are lightning fields, so using it will stack even more Vuln if you have a lightning field up. So it's a very useful DPS increase to use. The third skill in our bar is Rocket Charge, which is a movement skill and not affected by quickness, so generally it isn't very useful as a DPS increase. That said, it is a double leap finisher. So in combination with the lightning field, it is a very big CC. In combination with our heal skill or any other water field, it is a very big healing skill. It should be remembered that it has that utility, so you can always use it for your best advantage. Shock Shield, our number 4 skill, is very OP. Not only does it block during its duration, but it stacks a massive 10 stacks of Vuln, and you should use it whenever possible without interrupting your auto chain. Our fifth hammer skill is Thunderclap. Thunderclap is great. It is a big DPS increase, it stacks Vuln, it does a CC, and it's a lightning field for all of our combo finishers. So our number 5 skill is usually a great way to initiate combat and start a fight off, just because it breaks the guy's break bar or stuns them. It does damage over time as a pulsing field, and it stacks a bunch of Vuln. So it's a great way to open things up, and you should also use it whenever possible. As far as our tool belt skills go, we've talked about our super speed generators on our tool belt, but spare capacitor is a nice DPS increase. It's a big CC, and it generates a lightning field. So spare capacitor, very strong, definitely always worth using on cooldown, even if it doesn't give you super speed. We talked about how defense field is super powerful. And then lastly, we talked about grenade barrage, which is quite simply our best DPS skill. Grenade barrage and pure damage per second is the most powerful skill we have, especially on big hitbox targets. It is just a monster. So with that said, I think the playstyle that I can recommend is to focus on completing your auto attack chains and then using your other skills off on your hammer, except for number 3, off cooldown. That will give you the best synergy that you can. And additionally, you always want to use your DPS boosting tool belt skills off cooldown, along with, of course, your skills that generate super speed. That's a lot to remember. In practice, it plays a lot easier, and as you've noticed from some of the videos that I've shown of me playing it, a lot of times you can get away with kind of just spamming all of your skills off cooldown, because the build is so strong that you don't even have to pay attention to any of the specific combos that I've outlined and talked about. If you want to master the build and get to that level where you're doing all your skills with perfect synergy, more power to you. You'll like the build even more, and you'll find it super effective. But from my perspective, I mean, you can just run around the open world with your hammer and say me DPS and kill everything, and you won't die, and it'll be super good. Closing remark on gameplay is that this is one of the few builds in the game where your combo finishers are actually quite important. So I highly recommend you taking the time to learn what all your different fields are that you can generate and how the combo finishers you have in your skills work within them. In many encounters, knowing these different interactions can be the difference between victory or defeat. So that's it, guys. In conclusion, I hope you really enjoyed this build guide, and I hope any of you Scrapper players out there who wanted to play Scrapper, liked the roleplay aspect of the engineer with the hammer, but didn't feel comfortable doing it. Hope you feel more comfortable now in playing a build and getting some use out of it. And I additionally hope that it helps people that might have thought Scrapper had no PvE potential whatsoever to take a second look at it and realize that it's pretty good. And especially solo, it can get a lot done. If you have questions, comments, tips, or tricks, please leave them below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you are excited about the next build in the series, let me know that as well, and I will see you soon. Thanks.